Hello, everyone. This is Eleanor Rigby. I was sitting here in my kitchen this morning holding this heavy, rusted old skeleton key. It doesn't open a single door in this house, but I've kept it in my jewelry box for over 50 years. Looking at it today with the sun hitting the dust motes in the air, I realize how much of my life is tied to the weight of that little piece of iron. It reminded me of a time when I thought my world was falling apart right at the moment. It was supposed to be beginning. If I hadn't learned the lesson that key taught me, I don't think I'd be the woman I am today, and I certainly wouldn't have had the life I shared with my Thomas. Before I tell you this story, please subscribe. I want to pass this wisdom down before I'm gone so you don't make the same mistakes we did when we were young and headstrong. It was 1973. Think back to that year, or ask your parents about it if you weren't there. The world felt like it was shifting under our feet. There was an energy crisis, lines at the gas stations that stretched for blocks, and the cost of everything was climbing faster than we could keep up with. Thomas and I had been married for 3 years, living in a cramped, drafty apartment in the city where you could hear the neighbor's television through the walls, and the radiator hissed like a trapped cat all winter long. We wanted a home. We hungered for a piece of the world that belonged to us, a square of soil where we could plant a garden and, in some distant golden one day, hang a swing from a sturdy branch. On paper, we were penniless. In reality, we felt even poorer. I spent my days as a junior secretary, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the typewriter echoing in my ears long after I'd left the office, my fingers locked in a permanent cramp. Thomas was a ghost disappearing into the roar of the mill for double shifts and returning home smelling of grease and exhaustion. We didn't just save, we hoarded. The cinema was a luxury for other people. Restaurants were a fantasy, I learned, the grim alchemy of making a single chicken stretch across half a week, the Sunday roast that felt like a feast, the thin sandwiches of Monday, the Tuesday stew padded with potatoes, and finally the Wednesday broth. That was little more than salted water and memory. Our world was narrow, defined by sacrifice, but our eyes were fixed on the horizon, on the quiet promise of a front porch and the simple dignity of a patch of grass. I can still hear his voice from that rainy Tuesday in October. He came home dripping wet, his boots caked in gray mud, and he threw his cap on the table. He said, "Eleanor, I found it. It's out in the suburbs, near the old creek. It's small and it needs work, but it's ours if we can swing the down payment." My heart leapt, but then it sank just as quickly. We went to the bank the next day. I wore my best floral dress, the one I'd sewn myself, and Thomas wore his only suit, which smelled faintly of cedar and old dreams. The loan officer was a man named Mr. Henderson, a man with thin spectacles and a heart that seemed made of ledger paper. He looked at our savings. He looked at the rising interest rates. They were hitting 7, 8, even 9% back then, and he shook his head. "Mr. Rigby, Mistress Rigby," he said, and I can still see the way his pen tapped against the desk. Tap, tap, tap. "You're asking for a miracle. With the economy the way it is, you're a risk. You don't have enough of a cushion." I felt the tears stinging my eyes. We had sacrificed everything for 2 years. I looked at Thomas, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of defeat in his eyes. We walked out of that bank into the cold autumn air, and we didn't speak for the entire bus ride home. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that grows like a wall between two people. When we got back to our little apartment, the frustration boiled over. I started crying, blaming the world, blaming the bank, and then, unfairly, I started blaming him. I told him he should have worked more overtime. He told me I shouldn't have bought that new pair of shoes 6 months ago. We said things we didn't mean. Cruel things. I told him maybe we weren't meant to have a future if we couldn't even manage a deposit. He looked at me, his face pale, and he said, "Is that all I am to you, Eleanor? A bank account? I'm trying to build a life for us, and all you see is what we don't have." He walked out. He didn't come back until after midnight. That night, lying in the dark, listening to the city sirens, I realized that the house was becoming a ghost that was haunting our marriage before we even bought it. We were letting a pile of bricks and mortar come between the love we had sworn to protect. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest year of my life. But the next morning, Thomas came into the kitchen. He didn't apologize with words right away. He just sat down, took my hand. His hands were so rough back then, callous from the mill, and he placed that skeleton key on the table. He had gone back to the owner of the house, a widow who was tired of waiting for a buyer. He had spent the night talking to her, promising her that if she would carry a private note for the remainder of the down payment, he would spend every weekend fixing her fences and painting her porch for free. He didn't give up, and I realized then that I had been looking at the struggle as a sign of failure when I should have been looking at it as the foundation. We bought that house in the spring of '74. It was a wreck. The roof leaked, the wallpaper was peeling in long, sickly strips of beige and green, and the heater sounded like a freight train. I remember one night in November of that first year, the heater gave out completely. It was freezing. We didn't have the money to call a repairman, not after paying the mortgage and the private note. We dragged our mattress into the living room, right in front of the fireplace, and we piled every blanket we owned on top of us. We huddled together for warmth, the smell of wood smoke in our hair. Thomas looked at me and whispered, "Are you sorry we bought it, El?" I looked around at the peeling walls and the darkness of the cold house, and then I looked at him. I said, "No, because the house is cold, but you aren't." Young people today might not understand this, but back then, we didn't have the luxury of moving on when things got difficult. There was no swipe left on a hardship. You had to stay in the room. You had to look at the person you loved across the wreckage of your plans and decide that they were more important than the plan itself. We spent the next 10 years fixing that house, one board at a time. Every time we hammered a nail, it was like we were strengthening the bond between us. Let me tell you the truth. That house eventually became beautiful. We raised 3 children there. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners where the table groaned under the weight of the food. But the house wasn't the blessing. The struggle to get the house was the blessing. You have to understand that in all my 80 years, I've learned that the good life isn't something you find, it's something you forge. Experience has taught me that we are living in a world now where everyone wants the finished product. You want the perfect home, the perfect spouse, the perfect career, and you want them right now. But there is a sacredness in the not yet. Why did our marriage survive when so many others crumbled under the weight of financial stress? It's because we decided that we were on the same side of the table in the '70s. When those interest rates were climbing and the world felt like it was ending, we didn't turn on each other, we turned toward each other. Love isn't a feeling you have when the sun is shining and the bank account is full. Love is a decision you make every morning when you wake up in a cold house with a leaking roof. It's a decision to say, "I would rather be cold with you than warm with anyone else." Patience is a word we don't use enough anymore. We become a microwave society, but a good marriage is a slow cooker. It takes time, it takes low heat, it takes a lot of stirring. Sacrifice isn't a dirty word either. Giving up something you want now for something we need later is the highest form of intimacy. I promise you, if you are struggling right now, whether it's with your finances, your partner, or just the feeling that you're falling behind, it is not the end of your story, it is the sharpening of your soul. My late husband used to say that you can't temper steel without fire. We were tempered in the 70s. We were made strong by the very things we thought would break us. Think about that. Truly think about it. If everything came easy, you would never know what you're capable of surviving. You would never know the depth of the person standing next to you. As I look at this old key today, I don't see the struggle anymore. I see the victory. I see 45 years of morning coffee and 30 years of grandbabies running through those hallways. I see the man who didn't give up on a house and, more importantly, didn't give up on me. I want you to take a breath and look at your life. Don't look at what's missing. Look at who is there with you. Cherish the struggle, because one day you'll be my age and you'll realize that the hardest years were actually the ones that gave your life its color. I wish for you a happiness that isn't fragile. I wish for you a love that can withstand a high interest rate and a cold winter. Loyalty is a long-term investment, and the dividends are a peace that the world cannot give and cannot take away. Thanks for listening to An Old Soul. Subscribe, share this with someone you love, and cherish them while they are here. Life is shorter than you think, but it is wider than you can imagine if you share it with the right person. Would you like me to write a similar script focusing on the joys and challenges of raising children during that same era?